Hey everyone, Nate the Voluntarist here, and today we have a very special guest coming on. He's actually a candidate for Congress up over in the state of Maine. He started off as state senator from Maine from uh, 2014 till 2018. He also ran for the Senate against incumbent Senator Angus King. That would be Eric Brakey. So, Eric, welcome to the show.
Glad to be on with you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And from what I understood, did you also work in the Ron Paul campaign?
Yeah, that's how I got started in all of this. I was just kind of a grassroots Ron Paul guy in 2011. Ended up taking a position on the Ron Paul campaign. Came home to Maine. Started off as a field director and then became the state director for the campaign in 2012. Maine was actually one of the few states that we won.
Oh, nice, sweet. Well, so before we actually dive into the topics, what I traditionally do whenever I have a special guest on is we introduce ourselves not just to the audience but to you, so that way you get to know us and where we're coming from. So that being said, I'll let both Darkon and S-Man toss a coin to see who's going to go first.
I'll go ahead and go first just to test my audio. How does it sound right now?
Not as bad as originally, so let's just use that while it lasts. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. You know me, Dark Conservatarian, often enough anyways, guest on Nate the Voluntarist live stream, conservative libertarian political commentator on YouTube, and trying to immigrate some of my content, onto BitChute more and more. Check that channel out. It's under the same name. And so, yeah, that's all I have right now.
All right. Go ahead, S-Man.
All right. As he just said, this man speaks. I kind of do this somewhat similar stuff to what DarkCon does. Have not touched BitChute in a while, so I'll probably do that at some point in the future. I generally have my own videos in a libertarian perspective. Oftentimes it's politics or whatever is on my mind at the moment. Occasionally I'll be on Nate's show, or sometimes I'll be on DarkCons. We'll probably do that at some point in the future. And generally, my focus is based on civil liberties and what can we do to improve the lives of the American people, especially in terms of civil liberties that they have had stripped from them time after time in the first 2 decades of the century, which, realizing that it's going to be a new decade in less than a month, is a little nice to know. So that's all you really need to know about me. And yeah, I'm just glad to be on here and talking with Senator Brakey here. So.
All right. And by the way, I actually jokingly referred to you and Darkon as Batman and Robin of libertarianism.
Isn't Batman taller?
I don't know.
Because I'm probably taller than Darkon, so.
He's taller than 6 foot.
All right. Well, to get to know me, I am static.
Darkon, mute yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Apologies for the technical difficulties, ladies and gentlemen. So, anyways, I am Nate the Voluntarist. I'm the host of this show. I originally started off as a lifelong liberal Democrat in the Hillary Clinton, Joe Lieberman camp for 10 long years. And then I became disenfranchised with the Democrats, becoming a neoconservative Republican in the John McCain, Lindsey Graham camp. And then around 2012, I discovered Ron Paul and his son. They both got me thinking on the road towards freedom. And then I eventually become a libertarian. And then Eric July, who is a hip hop rapper, or actually more like a rap metal artist, who is the frontman of Backwards. He convinced me to become a voluntarist, and here I am today. So, do you know who Eric July is, Eric?
I do. I've heard him on the Tom Woods show.
Oh, nice. So, all right. So, anyways, we do have topics set up, and oh wait, okay. I thought it was Corey that just notified me. Never mind. Okay, so we do have topics set up, and we'll discuss those topics, and then we can get into the Q&A, which will be in the live chat. And with StreamYard, what I can actually do is I can flash the questions onto the screen, so that way we can all read it. So, that's something that Hangouts never had. So, the first topic that we wanted to discuss with you, Eric, is what are your feelings about the Libertarian Party and its current status?
Yeah, well, of course, I'm a Republican, though I consider myself first and foremost a member of the Liberty Movement, and I think that the Liberty Movement is bigger than any one political party. And I think that, of course, people need to ask themselves, if the goal is to advance the Liberty Movement, what is the role that you can play, and where does that role take place, where you can make the biggest effect on advancing the cause of liberty? For me, that has been working through the Republican Party, because in Maine we've established a very strong liberty wing of the Maine Republican Party ever since we took over the party in 2012 under the Ron Paul campaign. And I've had a lot of success in the state Senate and was the Republican nominee for U.S. Senate as a Liberty Republican. Though some people feel that the best route for them is through the Libertarian Party, and I personally think that there are many different routes we can take to advance the cause of liberty, and I think the important thing is that we are recognize we're fighting for the same cause. I do think that the Libertarian Party itself has been, it seems to me that it's kind of lost its way a little bit. I think that there's been a lot of, we've lost the kind of clarity that Ron Paul brought to the message in 2008 and 2012 that woke so many people up, including myself, and it sounds like some of you all. And in an exchange, they're looking for people who kind of come in with this, rather than moral clarity, rather than a clear message. They're looking for people with good resumes, and good resumes don't inspire people. You can put up former Republican governors, as to lead the Libertarian ticket, but that's not going to change minds. That's not going to awaken people. Which ultimately, if the liberty cause is going to succeed, that's something that has to be done. I am very encouraged when I hear about things like the Mises Caucus in the Libertarian Party and efforts to have the Libertarian wing of the Libertarian Party actually assert itself more. That's encouraging to me. But for my part, the path that I am on is through the Republican Party. That's right now for me, the Republican Party is the most effective vehicle I can use to advance the cause of liberty. But it might be the most effective vehicle for others is something different.
Yeah, kind of like with me, or like with Justin Amash, he just became an independent because he'd rather go his own way. He doesn't want anybody telling him what to do or what to think. He'd rather just go his own way, just stick to his guns, stick to his principles, and not abandon them or even compromise.
Yeah, I hear you there, and I have a lot of respect for Justin Amash. I will say, I wonder. I want him in Congress. I think that him and Thomas Massie are two of the most the best congressmen we have. Though I disagree with him somewhat on some of his conclusions on impeachment and all that. But yeah, but I think that the danger, of course, is now that he's gone independent. In his race for Congress, there's going to be him as an independent, and then there's going to be a Republican, and then there's going to be a Democrat, and he's going to be splitting the vote with the Republican, and it's largely, and it's going to make it much more difficult for him to win re-election. And I think the most important thing is that he's there in Congress advocating for liberty. And I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it turns out. I worry that he has really harmed his ability to remain in Congress and to be an effective voice for liberty there. I remember, Ron Paul, even in the height of the George W. Bush years, and certainly George W. Bush was in so many ways the antithesis of a libertarian. And yet Ron Paul remained in the Republican Party because the Republican Party was an effective vehicle for him to win re-election and to have a platform and to advocate for the ideas. And I don't know. We'll see. Justin Amash has rolled the dice and made a real gamble here. We'll see if it pays off or not. I certainly, though, am concerned that we might lose him.
Yeah.
So, if I may ask out of curiosity, do you think that a third-party ticket should be avoided as much as possible, or am I reading you wrong, sir?
No, I would say that there are circumstances where a third-party ticket is valuable. I just think it's very difficult for a third party to win under the current the current system of elections that we have. You know, Ron Paul talked about it. It's a rigged system. It's the rules are written by the two major parties. And so it is very difficult unless you are using one of the two major parties as a vehicle to win election. There are rare exceptions, but they're very rare. And but that said, maybe sometimes, sometimes you might have a really bad, like, neoconservative Republican, and you want to make that person lose.
Yeah.
In that case, maybe a third party person to split the vote could be a good thing to stop someone like a John McCain or a Mitt Romney. I think that's ultimately, as far as electoral politics, that's the value of kind of a third party, at least under the rules that they are right now. Here in Maine, there's an experiment being done with getting a lot of background noise right now, but there's
Dark on.
We passed something, or it was passed by popular vote, something called ranked choice voting, which is kind of an experiment in rather than voting for one person, you rank the choices 1, 2, and 3. There have been a lot of problems with this in terms of implementation, and it's disenfranchised a lot of people who aren't used to this system. But the long-term experiment is, I suppose, interesting as far as third parties are concerned. It potentially takes away the whole third-party spoiler aspect, and maybe people would be more willing to vote for a third party as their first choice because they don't feel like they're throwing their vote away then. So that's an interesting experiment to see play out. But under the traditional system, it's very difficult for a third party to have any shot of winning.
I think that's a fair point that you made, Eric. I think it's I would wonder if the Republicans in Michigan, especially in Amash's district, if they'll ask themselves, if they do run a candidate against Amash and the Democrats, they'll almost certainly run a candidate in that race too. And I'm getting background noise. There we go. I think that they'll have to ask themselves if they do split the vote, do they think they could hold on to the seat and avoid a Democrat somehow winning that seat, because that'd be a gain for the Democrats. But I think that I think, of course, we'll have to actually see if there's any polling to see what is the story there in terms of Amash. I think that I sympathize greatly with his decision to leave the GOP, as it seemed like. I mean, you can look at his voting record. You can look at how he conducts himself. He's no Republican in name only. And in terms of how that's all going, as to how an independent will function in Congress. I mean, the only other independent was Bernie Sanders, who's a congressman then senator. But in terms of a right-leaning person as an independent, I think they'd still vote kind of in line with the GOP, but they're more free to vote their own conscience rather than worry about having to run in a Republican primary.
Well, and I will say, I mean, this is the thing. I think that independence is what you do more than what letter is next to your name. I consider Thomas Massey more of an independent than Bernie Sanders is. Thomas Massey is an independent in how he conducts himself, how he votes, how he evaluates, the issues. Just like Ron Paul was an independent. And I really think that we can get so fixated, and it's easy to get fixated on the letter next to people's names. But, I had one of the most independent voting records of anyone in the Maine Senate when I was there. In fact, it drove party leadership crazy because I didn't just do what I was told, and I had the most conservative voting record and the most independent. And it was just, I read every single bill myself. I came to my own conclusions that I didn't just follow the party line. It really is the attitudes of the people that we elect. And certainly there are a lot of incentives in place to discourage independent thought and independent action in our governmental structures. But that's why we need to do what we can to elect principled people who put principle above party.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually remember when there was talks about Rand Paul possibly running for president in 2016. People were often asking Ron Paul about, his son's voting record. Is he moderate, or is he this, or is he that? And then I remember Ron Paul saying what you just mentioned, which is, he was rather independent, even though he was elected as a Republican, and he basically described his son the same way. So, basically the capital R, the capital D, or the capital I is, basically just meaningless. What's more important is, where your heart is and, what you're voting for, because actions speak louder than words.
Oh, yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems that no matter what I'm doing, that it seems that I'm still going to get background noise. So I'm sorry. This is embarrassing, folks. My sincerest apologies. But yeah, I would kind of think that, or at least this was definitely my mindset during the election that I'm about to be speaking of. But the 2016 election was an election that I definitely thought that a third-party ticket was damn well called for. I mean, at the time, I basically thought that Trump was pretty much just a kind of a puppet, or a plant, rather, for Hillary Clinton at a time during the general election anyways. And so I ended up voting for Evan McMullin in that case. And S-Man here, he says that himself he ended up supporting Evan McMullin, even though he's a freaking Momo, right?
Yeah, I mean, he did pretty well in my home state. Like, he got like 21%, and that's rather unheard of. So I think he would have been the best one to win that state outright. So
wasn't he a big neocon though?
That I was not thrilled with. Although my mindset was whoever could take the 6 electoral votes away from Trump. Yeah, but this was my pre-libertarian days when I was still like weaning off the neocon rhetoric. But yeah,
well, I hear that we all have our journeys to arrive at liberty.
Yeah. Also, Darkon, your mic.
Yeah. What, is it still staticky?
Yeah.
I think it's only when you're not talking. So like maybe when you're talking, it's fine. But when you're not talking, if you mute yourself, I think maybe that works well.
Yeah. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all right.
Yeah. So, what's the next question, Nate? And I'll let you go ahead, Eric.
Well, I will just say real quick. I mean, because we're talking about Trump and the 2016 election. I went into I was a big Rand Paul supporter, big Ron Paul supporter, and I was very skeptical of Donald Trump. And certainly there are still many things I disagree with him on. I don't think that he takes the national debt nearly as seriously as he should. I wish, I get nervous when he flirts with gun control, and there's a couple of things there that certainly he's no libertarian, but he is a wrecking ball, and we have a lot of really we really could use a wrecking ball about right now.
Okay, Miley Cyrus. Sorry.
Donald Trump came in like a wrecking ball. Can you imagine him in that music video? Let's just make sure he keeps his clothes on for that one. But
yeah.
I don't need that freaking image in my head.
Oh man, that was traumatizing to watch.
But and I think if we were to compare Donald Trump to someone like a Ron Paul, Donald Trump is always going to come up short, at least as far as the libertarians' perspective goes. But if we compare Donald Trump to the presidents that we've had in my lifetime, there's a lot of things that are really refreshing about him. I mean, he's the first president in my lifetime to not get us into a new war. Now, I wish that we could set higher standards than that. I wish that he was bringing troops out of these wars. But and it's kind of just a sad reflection on how bad past presidents have been, that's the standard. You didn't get us into a new war, gold star for you. But compared to the presidents we've had in our lifetime, even just the rhetoric of, I'm seeing conservatives and Republicans now talking seriously about what we've put our soldiers through and the need to bring our troops home, when that was unheard of in the George W. Bush years. It was even difficult to have that conversation in the Barack Obama years, even though Barack Obama was starting all these new wars. But the neocons kept pushing this rhetoric that Obama was somehow he wasn't starting enough wars.
Yeah, that's the most ironic thing is Barack Obama was arguably worse than George W. Bush in a number of areas, especially in terms of foreign affairs. Yet they were arguing that he wasn't tough enough. He wasn't getting us into enough wars. He wasn't killing enough people. I mean, this was the first and only person I've heard of that has gotten a Nobel Peace Prize, despite having a kill list. Well, yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, and this is, I think, it's the sad reflection on our media these days and just our political culture, is that we focus so much more on what presidents and politicians say than focus on what they actually do. So Barack Obama was a warmonger. He got us into undeclared wars in Libya, in Syria. He had a secret kill list. Like he was awful if you care about peace, if you care about our Constitution. But all the media talked about was all his nice sounding flowery rhetoric and that and that he talked about peace. Yeah, he talked about peace while he waged war. Now, Donald Trump is certainly not an eloquent speaker in the traditional sense. And he certainly talks tough, and he drops a lot of Twitter bombs. I certainly think that Twitter bombs are preferable to real bombs, though he does drop some real bombs. But yeah, at least he hasn't launched any new wars, and he's been willing to engage diplomatically with countries that we're told we're not supposed to talk to, like North Korea and Russia. And they try to vilify him for these things, but these are the best things that he does. There are other things we can legitimately criticize him for. I don't like the continuance of the war in Yemen. I don't like cozying up to Saudi Arabia and using our military to be their air force. But but there are certain ways that he has broken the mold from past presidents over the last 20 years that are very refreshing. And I think from a libertarian perspective, there is some silver lining in all of this, that certainly I see some very good things here that are certainly better than we ever saw in a Bush administration or a Clinton administration or an Obama administration.
Mm-hmm. If I may ask a question, so
let's make it the last one so we can move on to the next topic.
Yes. So you mentioned in your when I remember reading up about the Senate race when you were running for the Senate, and you mentioned you had voted for Trump, and in your Senate race. How do you think you could work with the president if you are elected to the U.S. House? Like how exactly would you balance that out, as that's a state he didn't carry to begin with, partially?
Yeah. When I was in the state Senate, we had a governor named Paul LePage, who in terms of temperament and style was actually very similar to Donald Trump. It's funny. He talked about in 2016, he said, I decided not to run for president because I thought that the American people would never elect someone with my mouth. And we elected Donald Trump. So maybe it was actually his time. But, there were issues that I agreed with our governor, Paul LePage, on, issues I disagreed with him on. And as a member of the party, I emphasized the positive. I emphasized the things I agreed with him on: balancing the budget, welfare reform, Second Amendment rights. We worked together on those things. And there were issues we disagreed on. We disagreed on the approach to how we handle drug policy and the best ways to tackle the opioid epidemic and other things. Many civil liberties issues, many criminal justice reform issues. Our governor, Paul LePage, we agreed on things, we disagreed on things, but he respected that. For me, we were both men of principle. And for me, disagreement always came from a place of principle. And I look at how someone like Senator Rand Paul works with Donald Trump. Rand Paul votes against Donald Trump many times, but Donald Trump seems to know that it's not personal. It comes from a place of principle. And when you come from a place of principle and you don't make these disagreements personal, you leave the door open to work on areas of common ground. So I am always going to be open to work with President Trump on areas of common ground. We have a lot of areas of common ground, like bringing our troops home, like there's talk about how we can fix healthcare, repeal Obamacare, and try to bring more freedom into the marketplace. President Trump supports the States Act to allow the states to decide their own policy on cannabis and ending federal cannabis prohibition. These are things that I have common ground with the president. I'm going to be happy to work with him on. But there will certainly be areas where we disagree, and I'm going to disagree out of principle. I'm going to stand on principle, and I'm going to make sure that those disagreements are not personal. I'm going to always keep the door open with him and with anyone so that we can work together on areas of common ground and oppose each other when we disagree on areas of legitimate principle.
I have a question about that States Act regarding states' rights or powers or legislation when it comes to cannabis. Like, was that after he had fired Jeff Sessions as his attorney general?
I think he actually came out in support of it when Jeff Sessions was still the attorney general, which was certainly interesting.
Certainly is, because I remember that Jeff Sessions, he had renewed the death penalty for even dealers of drugs, illegal drugs.
No doubt about it. Jeff Sessions was awful as attorney general. He was awful. He's awful on cannabis issues. I was the Senate chairman for Health and Human Services here in the state of Maine, and I ushered through some sweeping legislation to expand medical cannabis policy in the state, to increase access to patients, to deregulate the industry and allow small businesses to operate more freely. We've made great progress in Maine. I think Maine is the strongest state in America for medical cannabis. We've also recently legalized it for adult use. That was something I supported as well. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you read in the Constitution, the 10th Amendment says that if we didn't delegate a power to Congress under Article 1, Section 8, that it's supposed to belong to the states and the people to decide. And so Maine people have decided where we stand on cannabis. Washington, D.C. needs to mind its own business. And if Jeff Sessions in his home state, if they decide something differently, if they want cannabis to be illegal, well, I can disagree with that. But ultimately, that should be the choice of the people of his state to decide. I believe it's in Alabama, if I remember right. That should be the choice of the people of Alabama to decide. But in Maine, the decisions we make should be respected, and the decisions in every state across America should be respected under the 10th Amendment.
So if we're ready to move on, I have a question about COPPA.
Just make that a real quick one.
Oh, I thought we were going to still be asking, like, what would Senator Brakey be doing if he gets into the U.S. House of Representatives? That's what I'm meaning, is that my question is, what would you do about COPPA if you know of what COPPA is, Mr. Brakey?
Break down for us all what COPPA is there.
It's an internet. Let me pull it up real quick. It's basically this the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. It was signed into law by Bill Clinton. Applies to the online collection of personal information by persons or entities under U.S. jurisdiction about children under 13 years of age, including children outside the U.S. It details a website operator must include a privacy policy, when and how to seek verifiable consent from a parent or guardian, and what responsibilities an operator has to protect children's privacy and safety online, including restrictions on the marketing of those under 13. It was enacted over 20 years ago, but it's only now come back into the spotlight.
Yeah, so I will say I'm not, I guess I haven't been following this issue very closely. Is that why, when you say that, I think about like how for the last 20 years or so, I've always seen like you go on certain sites and you have to verify that you're at least 13 years of age. Maybe that's it. But what is it coming back into the spotlight for? Is it being abused in a certain way? What's going on with it?
So recently YouTube was sued by the state government of New York, for I guess not abiding by the law. So it requires now everyone who posts, for instance, on YouTube, if you get huge amounts of money, you'd have to approve. You have to say yes, this video is child friendly or not, and to comply with COPPA. Did you want to say something, Darkon?
Well, I was wanting to say that I think your audio cut out for a second there. But the state government of New York, I thought it was the FTC that they were being sued by and that they were having legal battles with for the last 10 years.
Oh, I thought it was. I thought it was the state government. So it may have been. I mean, the FTC does have the power to enforce it. Oh no, yes, you are right. So the FTC issued a fine of about $170 million to YouTube for COPPA violations, including tracking viewing history of minors in order to facilitate targeted advertising, which I don't see what the problem is there. As a result, they announced part of the settlement in 2020 will require channel operators to mark videos that are child-oriented as such, and would use machine learning to automatically mark those as clearly child-oriented, if not marked already. You could be fined up to $42,000 per video. And yeah, I mean, there's various criticisms. So go ahead.
Yeah, it certainly does seem to me like a very blunt instrument that is going to maybe in certain cases going after real problems. But of course, whenever you get government involved, government's not a scalpel. It's a giant mallet. And you don't necessarily just hit the problem, the real problem. You end up hitting a lot of people who aren't a part of that problem. You know,
yeah, they're basically overreaching.
I mean,
go on.
No, I do recognize. You know, I think that there are some legitimate problems with YouTube. The question is, how do we respond to it? You know, I for example, I know that there are problems with people. You know, people manipulating kind of the algorithms on YouTube and you know, for example, they'll kind of create these really strange, bizarre videos, but they include like Elsa and Spider-Man, like in the headlines, and it gets kind of targeted to kids, and kids end up getting kind of exposed to some really bizarre stuff that is probably not good for them. But the question is, how do we handle that? And that's probably something that we should demand kind of through the marketplace, some accountability from YouTube in terms of how that works. When we get government involved in a big way like that, there's always going to be unintended consequences, and there's going to be abuse. There's going to be opportunities for them to crack down on freedom of speech, and I think that freedom of speech needs to be upheld. So I'm very skeptical of government getting involved in these things. That's something that if there's a problem, we in the marketplace should demand YouTube figure out solutions.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The big thing with the whole COPPA law is that if you are, it's going to like negatively affect your channel one way or another. Like if you put like your channel settings on child friendly, it'll cripple your videos to where they are almost practically invisible to the average viewer on YouTube and for anybody just browsing the site. Ratings won't be enabled and playlists won't be enabled for those videos as well. As far as I know, you can still see the views, but that's about it. And there won't be any advertising for those types of videos, for anything that is deemed kid-friendly by either the maker of the video or the people of YouTube working for YouTube or the FTC that determine, oh yeah, this is kid-friendly. So, but if you don't market kid-friendly, if you say, oh no, it's for adults, it's not kid-friendly, well then you kind of run the risk of possibly like getting fined for not marketing it as kid-friendly when they find out, oh, there is something in your video that is kid-friendly. So therefore, you're determining it for kids, and we're going to fine you for it. I mean, something like using Legos for your video or gameplay like I do for my videos, for example, could be fined for that. Or say a goofy animated thumbnail that appeals to kids. But you weren't really intending it for kids. You were more like intending it to be just a bit of eye candy, for lack of a better term, for just to catch the adult eye, the more, I guess, man-childish kind of adult.
My concern mainly is the $42,000 fine. So if you made 1,000 videos, which if how you have the time, I have no idea. But if you did, you'd be paying quite a bit of money in order to pay off a fine like that. So my concern is if it's an excessive fine, which I think $42,000 for a single video, I think that's an excessive fine. If you had about 1,000 videos, you're going to be paying $42 million in fines, and many people don't have $42 million to pay, especially for something as trivial as they didn't mark a video the way that it's arbitrarily stated. But yeah.
Yeah, and all these people that are going to be affected in this way are not responsible for the privacy or whatever of the children's online information being breached is my thing. They're just targeting innocent people, it seems.
That out of context sounds so bad.
Maybe unintentional, but still, be it intentional or unintentional, they're going after innocent people.
But the thing I don't get is the problem of like if a company looking at someone's search history in the sense of, if I search something on YouTube and they understand that's something I like to see, and then they're going to push that more towards me. I don't see the problem with that. It's not like they're finding out what your personal information is. It's not like they're going to find out like what's your social security number or whatever. That's not what's happening. And I find targeted advertising to be a total nothing burger.
Although I do kind of want to add that apparently Ian Corzine is like a lawyer here on YouTube. He recently got contacted by somebody who was in the higher ups on YouTube that apparently in the FTC law of COPPA or regulation, whatever it's officially called, there is a general audience acceptance that YouTube is not telling everybody. So basically, they're not even giving you the option to set your videos for general audience. This kind of makes it a little bit more of a jaded subject, but still kind of at risk as to whether or not you'll get fined or whatnot. But there's still more flexibility for setting up your channel that YouTube apparently is not letting everyone else know. YouTube is just being dishonest. I mean, take it with a grain of salt because we do not know of who this person that contacted Ian Corzine, the lawyer, it is, but still. I mean, if it's true, then, YouTube's lying.
Yeah,
they're just looking for an excuse to sabotage people.
Yeah, and just want to show a comment that one of my friends, Zachary Colley, just said about YouTube. YouTube is dead so far as I am concerned. Yeah, as far as... yeah, precisely.
I don't. Where's the lie? I mean, you look at the general actions. They're trying to fix things that were never broken. I mean, clearly it's not perfect. I mean, if you really work on actual issues regarding the site, I mean, using the flagging system is still a problem. I mean, obviously, other things. It's you have to ask. Where's the beef? Where's the issue? It's not something that's actually worth getting concerned about.
Right. And before we move on, JC Armitage just said about COPPA.
COPPA is all about data collection, but content creators don't collect data. Yet they're the ones who are going to get fined. COPPA is yet another power grab by the state.
Thank you.
Pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can't imagine the revenue that they're because I'm not trying to sound like an Alex Jones here, but I wouldn't be surprised they do see the potential money they could probably bring in from these COPPA fines. I mean, $42,000 a video. I mean, how many videos on average is someone going to get penalized for that they didn't mark correctly? Because I don't know if I don't think it's retroactive. I think you'd have to go through your entire catalog to try and correct them. And if you don't, I can only imagine the amount of money they're going to bring in from all those fines combined.
Right. Before we move on to the next subject, I just want to mention Corey just had a power outage thanks to a drunk driver. Someone hit a electric pole. So, yeah.
That's gonna...
So he'll be on whenever he can. So just want to let you all know what's going on.
So
anyway,
the thing that I kind of ultimately wanted to ask, though, to a quick answer on this, what would you do about COPPA? Would you work to repeal it, Mr. Brakey?
COPPA? I don't know enough about it, but it certainly sounds problematic to me from a free speech perspective. I don't know if it's something I would be, like putting the bill in to repeal. But if a bill came forward to repeal it, it certainly sounds like there are certain unconstitutional things in there that I would certainly support repealing.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's several criticisms that there's some issues that it doesn't even protect you from regarding COPPA. Let me see. It's generally it does not protect kids from accessing pornography. It doesn't even ensure totally a safe online environment, and it does not and it doesn't prevent people from lying about their age. So it's not even worth the paper it's written on. So
it sounds like a lot of government programs where it's like a security theater, like the TSA. It's there to make you think that government's doing something to keep you safe when really it just inconveniences everyone and does nothing to keep you safe.
Yeah, in contrast to the private airport security over in San Francisco.
They allow things to be private there?
Who would think that San Francisco would ever be an example of the greatness of privatization?
I have no idea. I mean, I'm stuck here in the People's Republic of California, and I'm still scratching my head as to why they decided to privatize their airport security, which is actually the lines are shorter, the workers there are nicer, people are not getting harassed, and more bad guys are getting caught. So there you go.
And people are moving out of the city a lot faster.
Yes.
Now, if we could just get them to see the light on other forms of privatization, that'd be just perfect. But you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I live near the Friedmans, Milton Friedman's son, his son Patri. I also live near several other libertarians and voluntarists who I've had on my show all over my the time the show has been on. So at least I'm crossing my fingers. I got a little bit of hope that somehow California will somehow get redeemed, but I don't know. That's only time will tell. Anyways,
if it does, that'll be a miracle.
Oh yes, it would be. Anyways, so the next topic for discussion, Eric, what is your outlook for 2020?
Outlook in terms of my race or in terms of everything?
Pretty much everything, the entire election.
Yeah. I think I would bet money that Trump gets reelected. I think that the Democrats have failed to put forward a field of candidates that could take him on. I mean, the front runners, who are they? They're Joe Biden, who just seems to be. It's just bizarre the things that Joe Biden is saying day to day. I don't know. Did you see what he was saying the other day about like kids in the swimming pool, like brushing his leg hairs and all that? It's like what is this? It's like what is going on with this guy?
I mean, the last dumbest thing I last heard him say was, he was saying, if you want to scare off a burglar, take a shotgun, go out your window, shoot twice, and then you'll scare them off.
That's actually the most reasonable thing I've ever heard him say. I also saw the remix for that; was beautiful. But yeah,
I do remember him accidentally saying, "I am proud to be the president of the United States."
Joe Biden. So a lot of things, 2012 was the presidential cycle I was the most involved with because I was involved, of course, on Ron Paul's campaign. And so I followed all the ups and downs of the Republican field. And I think there's a lot of parallels to be drawn between the Democrat field of today and the Republican field of 2012, going up against Barack Obama during his reelection. And Joe Biden is Mitt Romney.
Thank you.
Mitt Romney. He is the candidate who is boring and uninspiring and doesn't believe in anything. And at the end of the day, they're probably likely to go with him. You see a lot of other people going up and down. Joe just keeps kind of steady. You have the bizarro world version of Ron Paul and Bernie Sanders, who's got a strong and very enthusiastic base of support. but it gets blacked out by the media and probably will not receive the nomination. You have Elizabeth Warren, who, well, I'm not sure who I would compare her to, but she's certainly been fading.
Newt Gingrich, pretty much.
Maybe I guess it'd be kind of curious to kind of pair, if you really could kind of pair up all the candidates of the 2012 Republican election. Who are they most similar to in this Democrat election? But really, I don't see anyone in the top tier of candidates who could beat Donald Trump. I see maybe, like, if the Democrats were smart enough to nominate someone like Tulsi Gabbard, who has bipartisan appeal and is going after the issue that Democrats aren't allowed to talk about anymore, which is bringing the troops home and ending the wars. I think Tulsi Gabbard could perhaps be a very strong contender in the general election, but she's never going to win the Democrat Party nomination, not in Hillary Clinton's Democrat Party. So I don't see how the Democrats pull this off. I think the most likely scenario is they nominate Joe Biden, just like Republicans nominated Mitt Romney. But here's the rule that I have always seen in politics, is that the winner, almost always, the winner is the person who the election is about. The reason that Republicans lost in 2012 with Mitt Romney was because people didn't show up to vote for Mitt Romney. They showed up to vote against against Barack Obama. And that's simply not enough. And so Barack Obama won. It was a referendum on him. And so people were voting yes on Obama or no on Obama. And it's hard to win a referendum like that. And the same thing with Donald Trump. They do not have a single candidate who maybe Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders actually puts out a vision that people believe in. I'm sure if they nominated Bernie Sanders, maybe Bernie Sanders could actually could win a general election, though it would be difficult because it would be tough too, just because I'm not sure that people are ready to go down the road to socialism. I certainly am not. But at least he puts forward a positive vision, whereas the appeal of a Joe Biden or a lot of these other candidates are simply that they're not Donald Trump, and that's not going to be enough. I remember, why did people, Bob Dole, he wasn't Bill Clinton. Okay, well, Bill Clinton won. Mitt Romney, in 2008, John McCain, the election was about Barack Obama, whether you wanted Barack Obama or not. And so Barack Obama won. This election is going to be about Donald Trump, and that's why I think Donald Trump is going to win. People are not going to be voting for Joe Biden or whoever the Democrat nominee is. They're going to be voting against Donald Trump, and that's simply not going to be enough. I predict a second term for Donald Trump. I predict that I don't know how things will work out in the House and the Senate. I do predict that we're going to win the 2nd congressional district, and I'm going to go to Congress and join Thomas Massey and hopefully Nick Freitas from Virginia when he wins that race for Congress in Virginia. And we're going to have a new Liberty Caucus there to take on the Washington establishment.
Yeah, from what I understood, the congressional district you're running in has been leaning Republican, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this race for Congress is going to be one of the top contested races in the entire country. This is a district that Donald Trump carried by 10 points. It's currently occupied by a very vulnerable first-term Democrat who just kind of just edged out a victory in the blue wave last year. He won by a single point against a Republican incumbent who'd been there for 4 years. This is going to be one of the top battlegrounds in the whole country. We have a very, very strong opportunity to win. Whoever the Republican nominee is has a strong opportunity to win. And so that's why it's so important that we win the Republican nomination. And of course, if anyone who's listening in would like to help with that, they can go to ericbrakey.com and do so. But we have a very good opportunity. We haven't had an opportunity this good to get a Liberty champion elected to Congress since we got Thomas Massey elected in 2012. It's been 7 years. We are overdue for a victory. The Liberty movement needs this, and this is one of the best opportunities we've had in a very long time.
Yeah, definitely. And I was actually really disappointed when I know that Nick Freitas actually ran for the Senate in the primaries, and he unfortunately lost to a a neoconservative Republican who actually went on to lose in the general election.
It was a bloodbath.
Yeah, and but knowing that after seeing his announcement that he's running for Congress, I'm like, okay, I think he's got a much better chance.
Yeah, because in Virginia, the Republicans are done. They're done for a while.
Yeah.
I will say, Nick Freitas is a good friend of mine. He's an awesome champion of liberty. He's been amazing in the Virginia House of Delegates. He has a very winnable race there, too. I mean, his situation is very similar to mine. Of course, we both ran for U.S. Senate last go around. We both, neither of us triumphed in our respective races for U.S. Senate. But, we were both kind of first-time, federal-level candidates. I'll tell you, running for U.S. Senate, I ran to win. I thought that we had an opportunity to win. Of course, I was running against a very entrenched incumbent, former two-term governor, ranked the most popular U.S. senator in the country, even though he's a big government statist. But I performed stronger against him than anyone else ever has. And that race for U.S. Senate really got Maine people to know who I was more than they had before. It put me in a very strong position for this race for Congress. And I imagine for Nick Freitas in his race for U.S. Senate, set him up very well for his congressional race. I believe that was the congressional seat that David Bratt had, a Republican seat. Of course, before David Bratt, it was Eric Cantor. If you remember that that big upset, David Bratt took out Eric Cantor in the in the primary. Eric Cantor was in Republican leadership. It was a huge shock, as big as when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took out the Democrat incumbent in leadership that she beat. Mm-hmm. So that's a Republican district, just like this district here in Maine is a Republican district. And if we can get Liberty Republicans to win the nomination in these seats, then we will be in a very strong position to win in the general and get more people into Washington. Because I'll tell you, Thomas Massie looks very lonely there. He needs some backup. And people can chip in and help make it happen by going to ericbrakey.com/donate and chip in $5, $10, $25, $50, whatever they can to help make liberty win and free Maine and free America.
And I'll definitely leave those links in the description box so everybody, if they want to, they can do so.
By the way, I'm thinking that the background noise and whatnot, it seems to go away when I switch off of my stick microphone and onto my webcam microphone. The audio is going to sound like a bit of an abortion, but at least it's not an abortion while I'm speaking or while I'm silent and you guys are speaking.
I'm sorry. Wait, what just happened? I just had to go take care of something. I'm sorry. What is not an abortion?
I was saying that the audio through my webcam is going to sound like an abortion, but at least there's not going to be any static like sound going off while you guys are speaking and I am silent. But yeah, sorry. Apparently, I need to get a new microphone for Christmas this year. I put that on my wish list. But anyway, there's something that I was kind of want to address very quickly. Like, you want more Liberty Republicans in the House of Representatives and in office, just in general, to kind of get the country leaning ever so slightly more libertarian, Mr. Brakey. But my question to you, like, what's your opinion on the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, the ones that were like, safe to say, fighting against Trump and more Trump cons and establishment Republicans who were all like repeal and replace, whereas the Freedom Caucus, they were just all like, no, just repeal, no replace, as far as it came to trying to strike down Obamacare. Like, what's your opinion on them?
Right. Repeal Obamacare and let's just replace it with freedom. We don't need to replace it with more big government.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the Freedom Caucus. I recognize, the Freedom Caucus is not composed of a bunch of libertarians. There are a lot more Tea Party people, but I think there's a lot of common cause to find with people who are sincere in their kind of conservative, kind of more Tea Party constitutionalist convictions. I've already made the commitment to join the Freedom Caucus when I win this race for Congress. I intend to do that. I intend to work with folks there, and I'm a fan of the Freedom Caucus.
Yeah, I think the Freedom Caucus might be a little bit more apathetic when it comes to sex and drug rights, whereas actual true blue libertarians in belief, they're all like, no, let's strive forward more for ending the drug war and decriminalizing drugs in general, you know?
I'm sorry. So what did you think of the American Health Care Act when they're trying to have a skinny repeal of Obamacare? Because after I listened to Speaker Ryan, his speech about like this is a partial repeal, and then they could do more later after it's passed. And also, who would you vote for Speaker of the House if you don't vote for Kevin McCarthy of California?
I really don't know who's running. Can we get Thomas Massey to run for Speaker of the House?
I second that. I second that.
Here.
I really don't know who's running. I would have to know who the candidates are, or who would be running. So I'm not sure there. But on the ACA or Obamacare, I'm trying to remember all the details on the skinny repeal versus different repeals. I mean, I want Obamacare repealed. In fact, I want a lot of the federal government's healthcare involvement in healthcare repealed, even beyond what the the Obamacare did. You look at the history of healthcare in our country going back to World War II, and it's been the story of the old woman who swallowed the fly. I don't know if you remember this nursery rhyme I remember hearing this when I was like 5 or 6. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. Why, oh, why did she swallow a fly? We don't know why. We think she'll die. This old lady swallows a fly. She's got a problem, and so she swallows a spider to take care of the fly. And then she's got a bigger problem. So then she swallows a frog, and then a bird, and then a cat, then a dog. And before you know it, she's swallowing a whole horse, and she dies. And that's been the story of our healthcare system in America. We started with some small but legitimate problems. You can go all the way back to pre-World War II, small but legitimate problems. And we said, all right, we need a government solution for this. And so we swallowed a government solution. But that government solution came with problems bigger than what we started with. And so then we swallowed a new government solution and a new government solution. And we just layered government solution on top of government solution, fixing problems created by the last government solution, until we're at the point now we're about to swallow a horse. We are about to, people are pushing for a complete government takeover of our healthcare system through what they call Medicare for all, socialized healthcare. And the solution is not more government. It is to get the government out of it. It's to fire the bureaucrats who are standing between the doctors and the patients, put patients back in charge and doctors back in charge. And we need if we want to make healthcare affordable, we need price competition again, which has been completely removed from the healthcare system. You can do that by allowing people to save for their own healthcare tax-free through health savings accounts, expanding that. You can do that by taking the money we put into Medicaid, for example, and let's put that directly into the hands of patients so that they can directly engage with their doctors, and we don't need to go through these middlemen, whether they're government bureaucrats or insurance companies. We don't need these middlemen. They add nothing of value, but they're the only ones getting rich. Well, patients are overpaying and doctors are overworked. So I want to repeal Obamacare, and I want to repeal a lot of government's involvement of our healthcare system. We need to put doctors and patients in charge. We need to fire the bureaucrats.
Yeah, I actually, regarding the whole healthcare fiasco, if I may refer to it as, I remember, I only know about when Rand Paul was actually stepping in and saying, "Wait a second, this isn't right. This does, you guys are basically doing Obamacare 2.0. You guys are doing it in secret doors, behind doors." I actually remember, he actually tried to be a part of those meetings and they wouldn't let him in. I'm sure you know anything about what had gone on?
No, not really, though. I was certainly following Rand Paul and all of that, and I don't necessarily agree with Rand Paul on everything by rule, but in effect, I often agree with Rand Paul a lot more than I don't, and so I think he was kind of certainly on the right side of things and on the Obamacare fight.
Yeah. He was saying, I think he actually managed to read what they were proposing, and he was saying this is not a clean repeal. We actually have to actually repeal Obamacare instead of like saying, "Oh, let's just keep parts of it." And he actually did propose a bill that would actually dramatically get the market more involved instead of having government's grubby hands inside all of the in places that it shouldn't be in. So unfortunately, and not surprisingly, that bill was never taken up for a vote. So yeah.
And the only thing that was really done in regards of healthcare is that the individual mandate was repealed, but businesses are still mandated once they get up to 50 employees to start covering their employees with healthcare.
Yeah, and I do actually remember when the healthcare when that healthcare bill that Paul Ryan and yes, it was basically dubbed as Ryan Care or Trump Care. However you want to pronounce it. Rand was one of the few Republicans who actually did vote against it, along with, and they're saying that John McCain was the deciding vote, on that. I think we all remember when he finally walked onto the Senate floor. He raised his arm, and then he put a thumb down. No,
What a liar he was. He campaigned on repealing Obamacare.
Yeah.
People say that John McCain was such a maverick. He campaigned on repealing Obamacare, and then he basically lied to the people, and then and then he voted against repealing Obamacare. On top of that, Democrats love him because he stands up to Donald Trump. John McCain got awfully quiet when he was running for re-election in his primary, and he had a primary opponent. And he wasn't very critical of Trump during all that. In fact, he actively seeked out Donald Trump's endorsement. Donald Trump did endorse him. He won his primary, and then the moment he won, he turned and started attacking Donald Trump again. So what a maverick there that he apparently only stands up for what he believes in when it's politically expedient. Only did stand up for what he believed in when it's politically expedient. No longer with us.
You're not wrong.
But,
I mean, yeah. Like throughout his entire career, like when he was running for president in 2008, like he'd been critical of George W. Bush throughout most of his presidency. And then he realized if he wants to be the nominee, he would have to cozy up, and he threw away his principles to get the nomination. And he didn't even win. If he had won, then it would have been worth it. But in his case, he threw out his principles. Yeah. He flip-flopped on a lot of issues. And that's why he was called a rhino. I mean, there's several issues of legitimate disagreement over stuff he does believe in, but sometimes it's a little hard to tell if he's on one side or the other. He tries to just be a fence sitter.
Yeah, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's interesting. In that race, they always call John McCain the Maverick. Of course, Maverick just means that he occasionally votes with the Democrats, but he never stands up. He would never stand up against the Washington establishment. The real Maverick was Ron Paul.
Right.
He's the actual maverick, the person who occasionally who often disagreed with both the Republicans and the Democrats. But no, you're only a maverick if you're a Republican if you occasionally just go and side with the leftists and the Democrats.
All I can say is that John McCain voted against the bill for the wrong reasons. I think this was just him kind of giving the middle finger to Trump or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, I actually remember that one of my coworkers was in support of McCain. Like that was the last presidential candidate that he had supported, and one of the reasons for being was that John McCain, like during his career as a senator, he imposed, or at least pushed to impose, price controls on beef. And I was thinking, even at the time, no, that's a restriction on business rights on how you're to run your business. So, in practice, I do not know how that affected the economy for better or for worse, but by principle, it's pretty bad.
Right. Okay, so there's one more topic that I wanted to discuss just before we go into the Q&A, and that is, Erica, who do you take inspiration from like obviously it's Ron Paul, one of your inspirations, but who else? What other icons?
Living or dead?
Both. It could be either one.
Well, I take a lot of inspiration from Thomas Jefferson. I think that I read a excellent biography on Thomas Jefferson by Kevin Gutzman, who, if you listen to the Tom Woods Show, Kevin Gutzman is a regular on the Tom Woods Show. But I think Thomas Jefferson gets a bit of a bad rap these days. In fact, people are trying to take down some of his monuments, and because he was a slaveholder and things like that. And certainly there are things, as we look backwards in history, there are so many things that we can be critical of past generations. But the thing about Thomas Jefferson is that if we are critical of him for his failings in his ability to embody the liberty to its fullest extent, it is only because he equipped us with the mission statement by which to evaluate him by. The Declaration of Independence, the idea that all men are created equal, that we are endowed by our creators with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. That is the mission statement of America. And
hello?
Did he cut out?
Eric, are you there?
Are you there?
I was wondering if that was just me or what for a second.
Yeah.
Sorry, my Bluetooth headset cut out. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
In fact,
All
you
right.
sound a little bit higher quality, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, geez. Well, all right. Well, I guess those Apple AirPods aren't worth what I paid for them. But no, in all seriousness, so Thomas Jefferson, I mean, that mission statement for America, the mission statement of our country is liberty. It is doing all that we can to protect and to expand the franchisement of liberty to as many people as possible within our own country, and by example to the world, not by invading the world and forcing democracy, forcing systems, new systems of government on them, but by being that shining beacon on a hill, being a good example for the world. And so I take a lot of inspiration from Thomas Jefferson. I think that he set the mission statement for America, and that is a mission statement that I still very much believe in.
Beautiful. Have you heard of other icons such as like Murray Rothbard, Ludwig von Mises, or
absolutely? I've read both of them. I remember living in New York City and going back and forth on the subways, reading Man, Economy, and State. My first Pork Fest in New Hampshire, I got a copy of Murray Rothbard's For a New Liberty and enjoyed that very, very much. I'm certainly a fan of Austrian economics. I'm a fan of Ludwig von Mises, Murray Rothbard. I'm a fan of F.A. Hayek, though I know he differs on certain things. The Road to Serfdom was a very, very book I read kind of early in my process of becoming a libertarian.
Nice.
So yes, I certainly look to them as well.
All right. Excuse me. All right. So with that finally finished, let's go ahead and dive right into the Q&A. So I can actually flash the questions onto the screen. I don't know if you can actually see. Can you actually see the screen, Eric?
I can, assuming yes.
Okay, so let's see if I can.
The first real question was from Reckless Trucker.
All right, here it comes. What do you think about a libertarian being for government-owned prisons, not private prisons, and for no government involvement in healthcare or universities?
Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot of debate these days about private prisons versus government-run prisons, and I think ultimately there are problems with the incentives around prisons, no matter if they're private or public. Certainly, private prisons have poor incentive structures in terms of, they want more prisoners, and so they lobby for more laws, more crimes, so more people can be locked up and to increase their bottom line. But that's not unique to private prisons. You look at public prisons, and you have a lot of organizations that have those same incentive structures. You look at the prison guard unions. They want more prisoners because then they can have more people in the unions because you need more prison guards. It creates job security. And so they lobby for the same things. I think that the prison industrial complex is a real thing, and we need to fight against it. I mean, that's why I've been a big advocate during my time in the Maine Senate. I was a big advocate for criminal justice reform. I fought for, I sponsored many criminal justice reform items of legislation, and though sadly we didn't make a lot of progress on things in Maine. There's a lot of old ways of thinking there, but I've been a big advocate for criminal justice reform precisely because of the way, kind of mass incarceration policies have put a lot of people in jail who, frankly, they have not violated the non-aggression principle. I'm all for putting people in jail if they, hurt people or take their stuff, if you violate people's life, liberty, or property, but not if your crime is smoking cannabis. I mean, that's not a crime. If there's no victim, there's no crime. You can't commit a crime against yourself. It's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
Victimless crime, air quotes on the crime part.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of the question was about government involvement in healthcare, university. I'll just say, I think that government's involvement in education, particularly higher education, and in healthcare, has certainly made things worse, not better. So I am for, I want minimal government. I want to get government out of these things as much as possible.
Would you say that the Department of Education is unconstitutional?
Yeah, you read Article 1, Section 8. Nowhere in there do we give the federal government authority over education policy. Federal Department of Education should be abolished. They don't add any value to our educational system. They just add bureaucracy. It's not putting money in the classroom. It's putting bureaucrats in place over our teachers, telling them how to teach. I think that our teachers know how to teach far better than bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. And so, yeah, if I had the power, I would abolish the Department of Education. Those hundreds of billions of dollars that we spend on bureaucracy at the DOE, let's give that back to the taxpayers.
What are your real quick? What are your thoughts on No Child Left Behind? Now that I'm reminded of education,
No Child Left Behind and similar programs like the way Common Core was pushed on the states through Race to the Top, I think they called it. These are unconstitutional. Federal government has no authority on these things, and ultimately, it's detrimental. If we're going to have government involvement in education, that should happen on the state level, the state and the local level, and we should remember that the reason America was so beautiful as an experiment is we had these laboratories of innovation called the states. And we could try different things and we could see what worked. And if something worked well, we could adopt that in other states voluntarily. And we'd want to adopt those things because we could see that it worked and it was better. If we need to push things on people from the top down, then it's probably not a very good idea if it has to be imposed on people through force. So I would repeal No Child Left Behind. I would repeal Race to the Top and Common Core. Not necessarily because I think that the educational ideas behind them are bad. I don't know. I'm not an educator. I can't say whether they're good ideas or bad ideas. But I believe that the best ideas, when you have a real free marketplace of ideas, the laboratories of innovation, the best ideas are more inclined to rise to the top if you let it come from the bottom up.
Yeah. So if I may expand on the whole healthcare issue and about your move to want to, in your repeal of government involvement in healthcare, would that include advocating for the complete abolishment of Medicare and Medicaid?
I don't think that the American people are ready for that tomorrow. I think that, I like how Ron Paul talked about it. People have planned their lives around these programs being there. The problem is that these have been hollow promises and that the money is not there. So Medicare, for example, is they're saying it's going to go bankrupt within the next decade or two if there are no reforms made.
So it wouldn't exactly be highest priority when it comes to healthcare.
I think that as far as these promises we've made to people that they have planned their lives around them being there, we need to do what we can to maintain those promises and to make the programs work better. And ultimately, the programs work better if we give people control rather than bureaucrats control. So that's why I advocate in Medicaid. Let's take the $500 billion we spend in Medicaid every year. We don't give that to the patients. We give that to the bureaucrats. We take it from the taxpayers. We give it to government bureaucrats who hand it off to hospital bureaucrats. Let's take that money. Let's put that directly into HSAs that the patients, the beneficiaries of the program, control, so that we are injecting price competition back into the marketplace, and we are putting doctors and patients back in control of healthcare and cutting out the bureaucrats. That will bring the price of healthcare down because of the injection of price competition. That will make healthcare much more affordable, much more accessible, and it will actually serve the original intent of these programs much better than how they are currently being served under the very bureaucratic framework that exists.
Right.
And,
we need more competition.
Hey, Nate, if you don't mind me asking a question from the chat, kind of in relation to education.
Well, if I could flash it.
It's near the bottom.
Well, I'm just going to be going down the list of the questions. If that's all right.
I was kind of wanting to ask it right now because we're kind of currently on the subject of education.
Okay. Well, in that case, let's go ahead and.
From my Discord server, because I shared the link to this browser on there, True Grave, hello True Grave, he asks, how about ending public school system? I think he might be specifying more pre-K through 12.
Yeah, I don't think on the federal level that's anything we have any authority over. I think that is something that ultimately those questions need to be decided on the state level. What the best way are to provide for the best education for kids K through 12. So I certainly don't have any authority, nor would I ever try to abolish that on the federal level. I do think that there are innovative ways we can expand and make more educational choice available for people. I've been a big supporter of programs like they have in New Hampshire, these scholarship funds that allow people you donate to a scholarship fund, you get a tax credit for it, and the scholarship fund can help kids go to alternative non-government schools, or including covering homeschool expenses. We all want, I think for the most part, we all want kids to receive an education. The question is, what's the best way to do it? And certainly, I don't think government having an effective monopoly over education is good for our children.
Right. Okay, so the next question is from Reckless Trucker, or actually questions. I think there are.
Yeah, it's kind of two questions in one chat comment.
So he's asking about gun license across all U.S. state borders, and that abortion, while wrong, should be left up to the states.
Yeah, I think he's asking, do you think that gun licenses should be applied to all states, regardless of what state that gun license was issued in?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm known for in Maine is I'm the author of Maine's constitutional carry law. I passed this during my first year in the Maine Senate, so that all people in Maine who are law-abiding citizens who can already legally own firearms can carry them concealed without need for a license. So I'm known for the Second Amendment, and I do believe that people should be able to, if the Second Amendment is a part of our Constitution, it's a guaranteed right. I do believe that individuals should be able to, if you have a concealed carry permit in one state, it should be recognized in other states the same way driver's licenses are. Of course, I'm also grateful for the fact that in Maine, we don't need a concealed carry permit anymore. So, but I do appreciate that our concealed carry permits have reciprocity with a lot of other states. What was the other half of that question?
The other half was should abortion be left up to the states?
Yeah. I do believe under the current existing framework of the Constitution that murder is an issue that is decided on the state level as far as what the penalties for murder are. And I do think that under the current framework of the Constitution, it should be left up to the states. That said, I do believe that abortion is the murder of a human being with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property. That a child in the womb has the same rights as any other human being. And I would personally, I would support a constitutional amendment to
guarantee their right to life.
Guarantee that on the federal level, just the same as we did to abolish slavery in our country, recognizing that this is not something that, slavery was not something that we wanted to tolerate in this union. I don't think that murder is something we should tolerate in this union. But I think that we need a constitutional amendment on that.
So overturning Roe v. Wade, if at all possible, you would look forward to try to do that?
I think, overturning Roe versus Wade would put it back to the states, and the states would make kind of their own choices there.
Right.
I think that in order to legally affect change on the federal level beyond that, we need a constitutional amendment. And I would support a constitutional amendment because I don't think that we should tolerate murder in our country.
Mm-hmm. All right. The next question is from Zachary Colley.
I'm going to have to go, guys. It's been good chatting with you, and I hope you win your congressional race in 2020.
Talk to you later, S-Man.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming, S-Man. All right. Okay, so the next question is from Zachary Colley. He asks, what are your opinions on 3D printed guns?
I think that question was towards all of us, but of course he says starting with Brakey.
Yeah.
I actually fought to defeat a bill in Augusta that was trying to outlaw 3D printed guns. Look, if you 3D print a firearm, you're not violating anyone's rights. How does this violate anyone's life, liberty, or property? You have the right to 3D print a gun. You have the right to 3D print. You have the right to 3D print anything. And yeah, I don't support any attempts to ban that, and I think any attempts to ban that would be incredibly ineffective. Government prohibition does not work.
Right.
All you end up doing when you prohibit things is you prohibit the people who are law-abiding citizens from doing those things, the people with respect for the law. The people you are concerned about who don't care about the law, who are going to use 3D printed firearms or any kind of firearms to commit acts of violence against other people, acts of aggression against other people, they're not going to follow that law. So it's a toothless law for the people that you are trying to enforce it against, but for the people who you actually would like to be armed because they would use it for defensive purposes, they are the ones who are disarmed, just like all gun control.
Right. As Eric July would put it, all gun laws are infringements, pretty much.
Yeah. Criminals don't obey gun laws.
No, they don't. They'll just go and get the guns in the black market.
So my opinion on 3D printed guns is, in practice, it seems very kind of marginal on whether or not they are allowed, because once you print a gun, I don't think that, as far as I know, that gun isn't going to last very long. You're not going to get much usage out of it because, man, how freaking plastic the materials are and whatnot. It's not going to last as long as like an officially manufactured metal gun. But by principle, yeah, of course, I'm for allowing that.
Yeah, I live here in California, which has one of the most gun restrictions ever, along with, I believe, New York and I think Massachusetts as well, or probably throughout New England. And I can remember when Barbara Boxer was senator, she actually said at a press conference, "Sensible gun laws work. We've proved it here in California." I can remember laughing so hard because almost every day I look at the news and there's a shooting.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'll tell you, here in Maine, when I passed constitutional carry here in Maine in 2015, the Michael Bloomberg anti-gun groups told us if we passed this, there would be shootouts in the streets. We'd become the wild, wild west. Blood would run through the streets of Maine, they told us. And it would become so dangerous. We became the 6th state in America to pass constitutional carry. Since then, there have been a lot more that have followed our lead in Maine. And things did change. We went from being the 2nd safest state in America to the number 1 safest state in America. And those who tell us that we need to emulate the gun control laws in places like New York and Chicago and California, where all these shootings are happening, well, it seems like those gun control policies are not working there. Why would we emulate it here in the safest state in America? They should probably be emulating our firearm freedom policies in Maine, and maybe they would put a stop to these mass shootings. When 92% of all the mass shootings in America take place in gun-free zones, maybe it's the gun-free zones that are the problem.
Yeah. Because a shooter's not going to go up to a sign that says no guns allowed and go, oh, it says I can't take a gun in, so I guess I can't go in and shoot anybody.
I
mean, Matt Best actually parodied that.
As far as I know, all of America is currently a murder-free zone, and that's not stopping them either. Of course, with an asterisk of if you're in the womb, then it's not a murder-free zone. But if you're out of the womb, it's legally a murder-free zone, and yet people still murder because not everyone follows the law. And the question is, should we be able to defend ourselves against those who don't follow the law, against those who would violate not just the laws of man, but the laws of the natural law, the law that you don't murder and you don't hurt people, you don't take their stuff. We should be able to defend ourselves against those individuals.
There you go. Oh, go ahead, Dark Card, real quick.
Do you think guns should be allowed in public schools? Asks Drew Grave in the chat.
I think that those should be decisions that are made not by Washington, D.C., but made by local municipalities for what makes sense there.
Yeah.
I know I have supported legislation. So here in Maine, we have some very rural areas. So you take an area like rural Washington County, Maine, where the closest police officer might be an hour or 2 hours away. If someone were to come in and want to do harm to others, the police can't arrive in time to stop it. What do you do? Mm-hmm. I think it certainly makes sense if they want to allow, maybe there's a person on staff who's a retired police officer or retired military who's committed themselves to doing regular training to be prepared for crisis response. I think it might make sense in those situations to allow an individual to be armed, to be prepared in an emergency situation. Maybe in more urban areas, that's not what they want to do. But I do think that we need to have real plans in place for how we respond in an emergency situation like that. And just hoping and praying that we're going to pass these magical government laws that are going to somehow stop people from wanting to do harm to other people. That's magical thinking, and magical thinking isn't going to save us. We need to be prepared to respond in emergencies, even as these emergencies are rare. They are rare. I mean, gun violence in America is actually at a low point, despite all the media hype that comes up when these mass shootings happen.
Yeah.
But we should be prepared. People need to be prepared in the event that they do happen. And the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
So Zach Colley asks in the chat, opinions on cryptocurrencies?
When I ran for state senate in 2014, I was the first ever political candidate in the state of Maine to accept Bitcoin donations. And in this race for Congress, I have accepted cryptocurrency donations, actually more than just Bitcoin, several cryptocurrencies. In fact, I sponsored during my second term in the Maine Senate, I sponsored a first of its kind legislation to explore the use of blockchain technology to improve our elections. Imagine if, we're concerned about ballot security. Everyone's concerned about, is Russia trying to hack the elections or whatever. I don't know what the truth is there, but I do think it's a good question to raise. What are things we can do to secure our elections, to make sure that our ballots are being cast in a secure way? And I think blockchain is a godsend for that. Imagine if, here in Maine, we do paper ballots, and I think paper ballots are a very good thing. It creates transparency and helps make sure that votes can be kind of accounted for. But when we put in our paper ballots into the machine, it creates a digital copy of that, and that's what's counted. What if you took all those digital copies of all those ballots and uploaded them to the blockchain, and maybe they had a serial number, and you knew what the serial number was for your ballot? You could go and you could look to make sure that your vote was cast the way that you intended it. And then actually, if they're all uploaded on the blockchain, then anyone who wanted to could do a recount at any time of the vote to make sure that what we're told how the vote went is actually how it went. These are ways we could make more transparency in our elections and and better secure our elections. I think that blockchain technology is powerful. But of course, blockchain technology is just the technology underlying cryptocurrencies. I'm supportive of cryptocurrencies. I own cryptocurrencies myself. I personally like the challenge to the Federal Reserve monopoly, and I know that there are a lot of folks in Washington, D.C. who recognize the threat that cryptocurrencies pose to the established monetary system. They see that as a bad thing. I see it as a good thing. As a congressman, I will fight to protect crypto freedom, and I guarantee you that if they try to infringe upon our cryptocurrency freedoms, then they will not be able to do it without me raising the alarm bell and making sure we are all aware of what's going on.
What are your real quick? What are your thoughts on Bitcoin?
Bitcoin as opposed to like other cryptocurrencies?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm just
I'm Bitcoin is it's the cryptocurrency I own the most of.
Okay.
I think Bitcoin is kind of the gold standard in cryptocurrencies, and I don't know if any other cryptocurrencies will ever overtake Bitcoin or not. But I own Bitcoin. I obviously think that's among the cryptocurrencies. That's the most likely to succeed.
All right. The True Grave asks is asking about government subsidized homeschooling.
Yeah. So I think the danger with subsidies is that with subsidies comes control.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's kind of one of the reasons I've become increasingly skeptical of the whole idea of vouchers, because if we start giving people taxpayer funded vouchers for private schools or homeschooling or things like that, that's going to come with government imposed standards, as it probably should. I mean, the government shouldn't just be giving out our taxpayer money with no standards. What if people what if their idea of, school was something crazy and barbaric and something that we would all recognize as really detrimental? We don't want our taxpayer dollars going to support that. Which is why we should, instead of, subsidizing with taxpayer money these things, we should do what we can to empower people to use their own money to do these things, which is why I like the New Hampshire system. You give people tax credits for donating to scholarship funds, and those scholarship funds can then help people go to private schools or homeschool or alternatives to the government schooling system. I think tax credits are a better route to go, as opposed to vouchers or direct subsidies. I think tax credits will make less of an argument for government to try to impose their Common Core standards or whatever standards they want to impose on our education system.
All right. Next question from True Grave. He asks, do you believe in positive rights?
No, I don't. positive rights only exist by negating negative rights. You don't have, if you don't have the right, if you don't have a right on a desert island, you don't have it at all. On a desert island, you could say, I have a right to free healthcare. Okay, who's going to provide it to you? If you claim a right that can only be claimed by depriving someone else of their life, their liberty, or their property, then that's not a right. Now, of course, you could argue there are certain exceptions. People point to, like in the Constitution, you have a right to a lawyer. I will point out that your right to a lawyer is because the legal system, the government, that's the government imposing on you, and the government imposition, creating another obligation. Okay, if the government's going to impose, this legal system is going to impose on you, then at very least we need to make sure that you have legal representation to be able to navigate the system. So I think that's totally different than something like claiming you have a right to healthcare or a right to housing or a right to food. These are good things for people to have. We should do everything we can to create a free market system that provides these things to people at low cost and high quality. But government's not really good at providing these things at low cost and high quality. In fact, government tends to make things more expensive and makes things lower in quality. So, no, I don't believe in positive rights. I only believe in our negative rights to life, liberty, and property.
If I could add on to last part, it's also not free at all because someone is actually paying for it.
Exactly. Well, certainly there's no such thing as free, especially not when the government's involved.
Right.
Not only is there the cost, and I will say this idea of free healthcare. Let's hit on that. Not only is it there the cost to the taxpayers who are paying for the healthcare, but there is a cost to yourself as the recipient of that supposedly free healthcare, because what is lost when you surrender your responsibility for your own healthcare, you are also surrendering your freedom to make your own healthcare decisions. Because as the old golden rule, he who has the gold makes the rules. If you aren't the customer, you aren't the one being served. Your decisions, your preferences are not valued by the system. And so we're going to find that, I often say that if we surrender our responsibilities, if we find that we are no longer responsible for the consequences of our own decisions, we will soon find that we are no longer free to make those decisions in the first place.
Right.
Hey, Nate, there was a question I think you kind of skipped over. JC Armitage was asking, and this does kind of rewind us a little bit back to education, but he asks,
my bad.
They ask anyways, because we don't know if they're a dude or a chick.
Is this it?
Speaking of Department of Education, what do you think of the Prussian model of education, the education system that almost the entire world, including the U.S., uses, and zero tolerance? What do you think of Prussian model of education and zero tolerance?
I don't know anything about the Prussian model of education. I apologize. I wish I could speak eloquently about this, but it's not something I'm familiar with.
Neither do I.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, for me, and this is really kind of gets to, I'm not an expert on, there are many things I'm not an expert on. I'm not an expert on education policy. I'm not the person who's going to say, this is how you should educate your kids. Frankly, I think the problem is that we send far too many people to Washington, D.C. who believe they are experts, who believe they can come up with one-size-fits-all solutions, and believe they can say in a top-down model, this is how you must do things. That is the problem. It's what Murray Rothbard talks about, the idea that no experts at the top of the field know enough to know what's best for you in your individual life. Should we have plans by the many or plans by the few? I'm all for plans by the many. I think that you should be able to make your own decision in your own life for how you live. I think you should be able to make your own decision as a parent for how your kids are educated. And I think that collectively, as individuals, we will, the knowledge of the crowd, we will find that the best ideas rise to the top in the marketplace of ideas. That is not what happens when government is dictating things from the top down. It is not the best ideas that succeed, but the most politically expedient ideas that succeed. And those are rarely the best. So I can't speak on the Prussian model of education. I don't know the answer to that. But I can just say that I think that education needs to be decided in the best case scenario by the parents, next best case scenario on the local level, next best case scenario on the state level, but never in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. should have no part in it.
All right. Zachary Colley has another question, and that is, let's see. What do you think of nullification as a solution in terms of laws and policy making?
I support nullification. I've actively used nullification. I sponsored a law in Maine called Right to Try, which was a nullification of the FDA, allowing terminally ill patients to try non-FDA approved treatments when they're trying to save their own lives. So if there's something going through the FDA approval process, which can take up to 10 years, and you would like to try it, your doctor says, they'll help you try it. The company that manufactures it is willing to make it available. Should federal bureaucrats be able to stand in your way and say, no, you can't until we've given this the rubber stamp? You got 6 months to live. Should you have to wait 10 years? That doesn't make any sense. Who are they protecting you from? So we use nullification in that sense to nullify the FDA. And we passed that. Trump has since signed that into law on a federal level. Of course, that's not nullification once the feds are doing it, but it's still a good thing. One of the most successful efforts of nullification across the country has been what states have done in terms of legalizing cannabis for medical use, for adult use. I've participated in helping to nullify federal cannabis laws. I think that's a great thing. I think that the 10th Amendment, if the 10th Amendment means what it means, that the powers not delegated to the federal government belong to the states and the people, that must mean that there must be some recourse for the states to stand up for themselves, for the people to stand up for themselves when the federal government takes on powers that are unconstitutional. And so I'm all for nullification in those cases, and I've actively used it.
All right. True Grave had, I believe this is another question. I don't know if, I think we've already talked about it earlier, but I'm not sure though.
Oh yeah, guns in public school. I kind of pointed that out when we were talking about guns and gun rights earlier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any actual, well, I don't see any actual questions about policy in here, although JC Armitage is asking, did my question about the Prussian model of education and zero tolerance get shadow banned?
Oh, don't worry, JC. I accidentally skipped it, so sorry about that.
I guess I mean, since nobody else has a question, and if we have time, Nate, I do have one question myself.
Go right ahead.
Oh God, JC Armitage. So my question to you, Mr. Brakey, what is your position on immigration, and what would you do about it on the federal level if elected?
So I know that this is an issue that divides liberty-minded people, and it's a difficult question to wrestle with. I do believe ultimately that in the system that we have, particularly the massive welfare state that we have, there do need to be controls on immigration to our country. Milton Friedman said it's just obvious that you can't have open borders in a welfare state. And the welfare state continues to expand and expand in this country. I'm all for, and I've fought for welfare reform. I've fought to minimize the welfare state. If we're going to have a welfare state, I think that it should be focused on people who actually can't take care of themselves through no fault of their own, like our seniors and those with severe intellectual disabilities and autism. I think that's where it should be focused. But increasingly, it has been made available to able-bodied adults, non-citizens. And so we have a magnet in this country for, I would say, the wrong kind of immigration, the people who are coming and seeking free stuff. Give us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses yearning for free health care. That's not what the Statue of Liberty reads, but that's essentially what the system has become. So I do think that there needs to be, under the system as we have right now, there needs to be controls on immigration. That I'm for securing the border. I am for making sure that immigration to our country is merit-based. It's people who are coming here to work and to contribute, not people who are coming here because we've got all these free taxpayer-funded welfare benefits to hand out. So in that regard, I'm going to be an advocate for securing our border. I'm going to be an advocate for reforming the immigration program to make it more merit-based.
So will your position basically be repeal most, if not all, of the welfare system and then open the borders wide open? Just to kind of clarify.
So I guess the welfare system is one part of the problem with kind of an open immigration system, but it's not the only problem. The other problem is democracy itself. If anyone can come over here and vote to change our system, vote to make our system more socialist or more, so if we're looking at this specifically in terms of the non-aggression principle, so if people are coming over here and taking welfare benefits, that violates, that's a aggression against taxpayers. But if people are coming over here and voting for more welfare benefits, then that's an aggression too. So, if we're talking about people coming to our country and they don't receive welfare, and maybe there are kind of clear limitations on, what the path is to become a citizen and to be able to vote in our system, I think we can have a conversation then about relaxing certain things around immigration policy. But so long as people can come here day one, sign up for welfare benefits, here in our own state, here in Portland, Maine, they're trying to allow even non-citizens to be able to vote, and this is taking place across the country. I'm concerned that we will see people are being recruited from certain areas to come to our country to serve political agendas, because socialism has, the American people largely have rejected, well, not socialism completely, but socialism in many of its forms. And I do think we are seeing a real kind of long-term strategy of, if we can recruit certain people to come to our country and hook them on the welfare system, we can get them to vote for those who are handing out the welfare checks and get the socialist system that certain political movements want to see take place in this country, that many of the American people have rejected for a long time.
If I may, argue, I guess, more for the open borders crowd, just a little bit, kind of more of a devil's advocate type of thing. Say we get in the position of where that most to all welfare is repealed and we have open borders. As far as elections go, this doesn't determine as to whether or not we determine if there are going to be voter ID laws or not. I mean, if they come into the country to work and, just to live in the country, but they don't get their ID, then they wouldn't vote at all. I mean, particularly wouldn't vote Democrat, as your scenario there kind of implies.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Was there a question in there?
No. I'm sorry. It was just more of kind of a discussion, kind of. I don't know. I guess it was just a mild rebuttal.
No, and I appreciate that, and I hear where you're coming from. I think that we're ultimately talking in kind of abstracts and ideas right now, rather than kind of the reality of where we are today. And and maybe someday the welfare state will be repealed and we'll have all these problems worked out. But that's certainly, at least not in our immediate future. And
right.
I know in a poor kind of rural state like Maine, I mean, we've really been feeling it when our seniors and our intellectually disabled adults with autism are on wait lists for services to cover their most basic needs, and yet we have a lot of asylum seekers and refugees coming to our state, which frankly I completely empathize with where they're coming from, but they're kind of being put first in line for kind of these welfare benefits, and our most vulnerable people who've been waiting for a long time are being kind of like said, well, maybe there'll be something next year.
Right.
It's there are limited resources, and it's created a real strain on our system here in Maine. I don't know what's going on in other states, but I know here in Maine, it's been very hard for, the social safety net has not been serving the people who it has been most intended for.
Right. I mean, if I could just briefly touch upon my position just real quick. I mean, my position is private borders. I don't believe in open borders or closed borders, because I see it as a dichotomy. You're asking the question: should government open the borders or should they close the borders? So yeah, I actually touch more upon it in episode 35 of my show. And of course, one of my guests is pretty entertaining, by the way, in that episode. And I actually read from Robert Murphy's article, Privatize the Borders. Have you heard of Robert Murphy? He's an Austrian economist.
Oh, absolutely. I read his book on healthcare. And actually, it was very informative as I was developing my healthcare plan for this campaign. I'm a big fan of Robert Murphy.
Yeah, great guy. I like him a lot. So if anybody wants to know, hear me explain my position on immigration or on borders, watch episode 35. I'll link it in the description box, so that way you guys could go and watch it later.
Link it on BitChute, obviously.
Well, yeah, this is all going to be on BitChute. So,
yeah.
So bye-bye, YouTube. See you on BitChute.
All right.
But hey, I need to get running in a moment. We've been going close to 2 hours now, and it's close to 9 o'clock on the East Coast. I'm not. But I need to get running soon.
Can I quickly do one more question? It's actually from my mom, by the way.
All right. Well, I can't say no to that.
Freaking all right. Boy.
So she's asking about mandatory vaccination. Pharma companies lose immunity from being sued for vaccine damage. So she's basically talking about the 1986 law that was passed that would prevent vaccine manufacturers from being sued.
I'm very familiar with this. When I was the Senate chairman for Health and Human Services here in Maine, we had kind of proposals come forward multiple times to try to eliminate our exemptions for, our religious and philosophical exemptions for vaccines. And I opposed those bills every time, because I ultimately believe where there is risk, there has to be choice. And I think that I'm not opposed to vaccination. In fact, my fiance and I have talked it over, and when we have kids, we intend to vaccinate, or at least, most of the vaccinations.
Sure, absolutely.
But I think we do need to wrestle with the structure of the industry as it exists right now. The fact that pharmaceutical industries have a designation under federal law that their products are designated unavoidably unsafe, which means that they have no liability if their products injure people. And you can sue if you are injured, but it is not the pharmaceutical companies who pay out the damages. It is the taxpayers through these vaccine courts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a troubling incentive structure. If you had a choice between buying two cars and they were identical in every single way, except the only difference was that the manufacturer of one car had liability if their product malfunctioned and killed you, and the other company that manufactured the other car had no liability if their product malfunctioned and killed you. Which one are you going to go with? I'm going to go with the one that has liability because they've got more skin in the game. I think they're going to have done their due diligence a lot better to make sure that their product isn't going to kill me. And right now with these pharmaceutical companies, there's no liability. That incentive structure is not there. And as we are seeing this push across the country to eliminate all choice completely and say that mandatorily you must inject this into your kids' bodies and you have no choice on this, and there is no liability for the companies if their products harm them. That's a recipe for disaster. So I've been an advocate for maintaining the philosophical and religious exemptions. I'm also been an advocate for, and I'm going to be an advocate for in Congress, restoring liability to these companies, because if free markets are going to work, there has to be a liability for when companies make products that harm people.
Definitely. All right, so that's pretty much all for the questions. What I do during the end of every episode of my show is I do a weekly song. I
have a feeling I know who it's going to be by considering what you said when we were off air.
Might not be what you're thinking, but we'll find out. Okay, so since Eric's time is very limited, time for the weekly song. Drum roll, please. Okay, so this week's weekly song is Message of Freedom by Jordan Page. He's another liberty-loving rock musician. Have you heard of Jordan Page?
Oh, I've met Jordan Page. I'm a big fan of his.
Oh, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, I had a feeling that it was going to be Ozzy Osbourne because it's his birthday, like you mentioned off air.
Oh, yeah, I'm a big Ozzy fan.
Oops.
Yeah, so anyways, all I could say is, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. I wish
one
you
last
nothing
question. One last quick joke question from JC Armitage. Are traps gay?
Oh.
I guess Brakey wouldn't get the reference right there, but sorry.
Yeah, okay. So anyways, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. I wish you all the best on the campaign trail, and I do hope you win that seat.
I appreciate it. And again, people can go to ericbrakey.com, learn more about the campaign, and chip in $5, $25, $50, whatever you can do. This is one of the biggest opportunities the Liberty movement has had to get a Liberty champion elected to Congress since we got Thomas Massie elected in 2012. It's been 7 years. We owe it to ourselves to get another champion of Liberty elected to Congress. And this is one of the top battlegrounds in the whole country. We will win this if we all pool our resources, work together, and make it happen.
Most definitely. Let's increase the number of freedom lovers in office. Most definitely. All right. Thank you so much, Eric.
Take care.
All the best, sir, Senator.
And I want to thank you all for tuning into the Nate the Voluntarist live stream, and please come back soon.